Hey, how's it going? I often get asked, how do I know that my song is ready for being mastered? This is kind of a loaded question because it often implies a very subjective answer. The quality of a mix is not always easy to standardize because there are so many different styles of production, recording, mixing, genres. Having said that, there are some objective hallmarks that always belong to high quality mixes, regardless of your style of music. So I printed out two clips from two different tracks that were sent to me for mastering. Now, I'm not going to play any audio for two reasons. Number one, I don't really want the songs and the style of music to really affect your judgment when evaluating this information. Number two, I'm not really looking to trash anyone's work here. So this is just as a resource and to hopefully explore these ideas that can help you optimize your mixes. Let's dive in. Even if we just look at the waveforms of these two tracks, we'll immediately understand a very important difference, and that is in the peak level. If you look at clip A, you will immediately notice that the peaks are a lot more even. There's quite a nice dynamic range, meaning the difference between quiet and loud moments is still quite enough for the song not to be too squashed. But at the same time, the peaks are not all over the place. On the other end, clip B has a kind of the opposite thing going on where the peaks are really all over the place. There are some extremely loud peaks. It can be very problematic, especially if you're looking for a very loud master, because the peaks usually dictate how far you can push a master without artifacts or distortion. If there is too much difference between loud and quiet, it's going to require a lot more compression, a lot more clipping, a lot more processing in order for you to get a loud sound. And you're going to go and sacrifice a lot of the original dynamics. Again, to get to a certain loudness, you're going to need to squash this quite a lot. So let's take a look at an analyzer for both tracks so we can kind of quantify what we're talking about here. The loudness of these two clips is kind of similar. So we have 16 LUFS and 17.9. So there's not a whole lot of difference. Although what really stands out is the average dynamics. That's quite a lot of difference here. Clip A reads 11.2, while clip B reads 16.9. This reading is showing the difference between your loudest peak and your lowest average level. So this is quite a high number, especially compared to this one, which is kind of like a nice dynamic range. It's telling this reading is telling us that clip A, it's not overly compressed, but it's even. The two songs are both kind of the same ballpark music. They're rock songs. So they are both going for essentially a similar outcome with what would be a very loud master. This is also a more significant reading as well. True peak max. This is minus 5 dB. Oh, I accidentally deleted it, but okay. Essentially, it means that we have quite a lot of headroom in clip A, whereas clip B, the true peak max is minus 1, which is fairly loud, because the problem is not the loudness of the true peak, it's the loudness of the true peak in relation to the loudness of the average level of the track. So one thing the takeaway from this is that it's important to consider the relationship between RMS, which is average level, and peaks, which is the loudest moment in a song. This mix was handled really well. This mix still, clip B, needs a lot of work to get to the point where clip A is at. And definitely something that should be addressed before mastering for a cleaner, louder result. You can also take a look at the EQ curves of the two tracks. Right off the bat, we can see one of the main problem areas in mastering is the low end, and a lot of people tend to overdo it. It eats up a lot of headroom. And in this case, you can see that mix A, clip A, there's quite a lot of quote unquote good bass. This is like from about 50 to 80 hertz. It's quite prominent, but this is the kind of low end that you really want, at least in a modern kind of rock mix, because it's still kind of powerful and beefy, but it's got enough clarity that you can clearly hear the elements. It's not just subsonic rumble. Clip B actually lacks these frequencies. There's like a big dip, like a scoop in this range, which is one of the most critical components of a good low end response in many pop rock type of songs. You will also notice mix A kind of rolls off at about say 40, let's say 50 hertz. This doesn't necessarily mean that the mixer applied a low cut filter. It's just how the mix is naturally leaning like this because of it's all the elements have been kind of arranged in such a way that this is the curve that the mix is shaping itself into. Whereas this has got a much broader low end roll off here. And this tells us that there could be a little too much subsonic rumble in the song that's really going to eat into how loud we can make this track be and the clarity of the transients, the punch, the impact of the song. The low mids are quite prominent in clip B compared to clip A, which they're quite present because it's an important frequency range to beef up the sound and create fullness, but too much of it. And the risk is you're creating mud, you're creating congestion in your mix. Same for the 500 hertz range. This is kind of like the center mid-range of the frequency spectrum. And in many modern mixes especially, it's quite often scooped. And point in case, mix A has a kind of a scooped curve throughout. A lot of modern mixes have a scooped sound. And that's because if you don't have very prominent mids, then it becomes a lot easier to focus on the low end and on the high end without having to go too bright and without having to go too subby. Whereas clip B, you can see that because there's so much mid-range information, they felt the need to boost the treble here so that they could get a little bit more clarity and definition out of the mix. Instead, mix A, which is the better executed mix, didn't really need to push this range too much because there isn't anything here clouding it. Clip B is suffering from congestion in a lot of areas frequency-wise. There's a little bit too much subs, a little too much mid-range, too much treble. And that's because the mixing engineer was trying to make up for the cloudiness of everything. So you have too much mid-range, you don't feel like there's enough bass, so you need to pump it up. You don't feel there's enough treble because the mids are covering it up. So it becomes kind of a vicious cycle of trying to recover what you're missing. And in doing so, you're only making things messier. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more content.